Hello, listeners. We're Shedding Light, and I'm Candy.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Susie.
And we're hell-bent on shedding light on unsolved missing persons cases across Canada,
in an attempt to find the missing piece of the puzzle.
What you are about to listen to is the culmination of countless hours of research in an attempt to gather as many facts as possible about the case by reading news articles, online blogs and forums, and by interviewing friends, family, and people involved in the case. We will discuss different theories and possibilities and pick them apart in order to evaluate their likelihood, or better yet, eliminate them. We weren't there. We don't claim to know what happened. We can only try to paint a picture using the resources that we do have. We don't claim anything to be fact that isn't. We don't claim our interviewees' words to be fact. It's their memory. It's their recollection. It's their truth, and it's their opinion. And everybody's entitled to one. That does not mean we necessarily share any of these opinions. And listeners, please remember, everyone, including the suspects, is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Please bear that in mind as we welcome you to Season 3, Episode 4, Let's Give Them Something to Talk About.
Produced in partnership with Please Bring Me Home and sponsored by Bruce Power. Ontario's long-term energy plan is counting on Bruce Power to provide a reliable and carbon-free source of affordable energy through 2064. To do so, Bruce Power has signed a long-term agreement with the province to refurbish 6 of its 8 units, investing $13 billion private dollars into these publicly owned assets. Bruce Power's life extension program will create and sustain 22,000 jobs annually, while injecting $4 billion into Ontario's economy each year.
Just a heads up that there is some foul language and adult content in here. Listener discretion is advised.
And he was meticulous. When he got into a truck, he'd take his hanky out and wipe the dash,
In some ways, Mary Ellen McDougall has never really stopped loving her husband, Neil, even though she hasn't seen him in 33 years.
In the year and a half we were together, we never had a disagreement or anything. He was my soulmate for sure.
Mary Ellen says Neil went to collect some money owed to him in the community of Ayton on the night he went missing, October 12th, 1985. When he didn't come home, she reported him missing the next day. She says police didn't take her seriously and didn't start searching for him a full week after he was last seen alive.
Myself and my friends, we walked every inch of ditch leading to Ayton and every abandoned barns. We just searched day and night looking for him and never found anything.
Neil didn't touch his bank accounts or credit cards after going missing, leading both Mary Ellen and police to the conclusion that Neil was murdered. And Mary Ellen believes she knows by who.
My mother-in-law found out where his truck was in Ayton. One of the perpetrators had phoned her and told her where his truck was. And so we went there and we found his truck. It was locked, full of fingerprints, and there was over 55 butts in his ashtray. And Neil never smoked and couldn't stand smoking. He would never allow anyone to smoke in his truck. But the police never wanted the truck or the butts. We were just told to take them home.
Now, the OPP would not say that they have a suspect in mind in the Neil McDougall case. They did, however, confirm that they believe foul play was involved in his disappearance.
I don't think there was a lot of water, though, where it did come out.
Having not heard from police in over a year and a half, McDougall was ecstatic when Nick Oldreeve and Matthew Knopper came calling. The amateur investigators from Owen Sound had been investigating Lisa Moss's disappearance when they decided to take on more cold cases, including Neil McDougall's.
I would love to find his body. I'd love to bring him home, have a funeral like any normal family. And our life was just taken away from us when he went missing.
Near Durham, Scott Miller, CTV News.
Can you imagine knowing what happened to your husband and never seeing his disappearance solved or his probable murderer being brought to justice? Can you imagine never knowing what happened to the love of your life? In this episode, we're going to share Mary Ellen McDougall's experience of just that. This amazing woman has endured decades of anguish and suffering, and through it all, she has remained a strong force to be reckoned with, transforming her experience into a healing journey.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back. Well, we've been a little longer than usual between airing episodes, which seems to be the norm these days, so for that, we apologize. We can only hope that we are keeping our listeners' curiosity piqued so that you will continue to listen and to care, and share the stories of the missing that we tell. And as always, please know this and every episode is dedicated to the memory of Nolan Panchishan. His story is our motivation.
As you know, the Shedding Light podcast is going to be doing a podcast on Neil McDougall. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's great. And it's a shame to let all these cold cases just sit and go colder. You know, I think the more these cold cases are being exposed, the perpetrators are going to, they think it's, it's been this many years, we're safe. But the more that it's brought out into the open, these people are going to get antsy. They're and they need to be. Yeah. I'm just thankful that these guys are doing what they're doing to help us with the cold cases because, there's just nowhere else to look for help.
There's not many resources out there.
No, and I thank you.
We're equally grateful that you are allowing us to come in to expose this again because we know it's difficult on you every time we talk about this. Yeah. But by you doing that, it's gonna share this so far and wide to people that need to hear this story.
To me, these people think they got away with murder. It's been 35 years. We're safe. Nothing's ever going to happen.
The beauty of what we do and what Shedding Light does and many other podcasts and organizations out there is that these cases are always on the top of our pile. That's not a knock at the OPP or whatever police service holds cases. Mm-hmm. It's just unfortunate that that's the way their cookie crumbles. The same detective that has Neil's case will unfortunately be the same detective that has to deal with the present matter to keep the present public safe.
Before we delve in, we wanted to clarify with listeners. You will recall in our last episode that Mary Ellen Rodriguez, the psychic detective, mentioned Railway Street. She is actually referring to Station Road, the same location the trio were seen with shovels and flashlights a week after Neil's disappearance. We thought we would recap Neil's story and discuss details with the team from Please Bring Me Home. So please welcome Matthew Nupper and Nick Oldreeve. Hi, guys.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hi, thanks for having us on here. So in 2018, Matthew, Melissa, and I, which are the three co-founders of Please Bring Me Home, had a conversation about are we doing a disservice to the other cases in Granbury County because we're only focusing on one. And it was pretty quickly decided that we should open up the door to these other cases. Neil McDougall was, I think, probably the second one we reached out to after Lois Hanna. So we contacted the family and began an interview process, started getting media attention, and opened up our tip site for his case.
We have gotten some tips in, but they've been very far and few between. If you compare Neil's case to the case of Lisa Moss, the first year or two for Lisa Moss was unbelievable, the amount of tips that we got in, overwhelming at times. Neil's was the exact opposite. We got very few tips in. A detective once told us that it was a very close-knit group there, and that's true. A very, very close-knit community where not much is said to outsiders. I think we were viewed as outsiders. Certainly if in the town of Ayton, where Neil went missing, and where people still live who, in that area, in that town, in that community, who know the truth. There are 3-4 people thereabouts who know what happened to Neil, and they're very tight. So very, very little information came in.
I think a stark difference too between those two in general was in Lisa's case, everybody wants to talk about it. In Neil's case, nobody wants to talk about it. Just nobody. It was this dark cloud over a tiny town of Ayton. And as Matt said, we were seen as outsiders, and it took quite a long time for people to begin to trust us and people to begin to communicate with us.
But enough information's come in that you have an inkling who the culprits may be, but there's just not enough strong evidence to bring them to justice, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We have not even just that information coming in, but the behavior of these three individuals behavior doesn't necessarily assure that anyone's guilty or innocent of a crime, but it raises some flags when you have absolutely zero cooperation. And we are never coming across as, hey, we know you did it. We're always coming across as, we want to give you an opportunity to tell your side. This is what we've been hearing. Is this true? Is it not? And they're just, nope. They will not call us back. They will not talk with us. And if they do, it's very cloudy. The irony is no response is a response.
And when you get to someone who just has no interest and hangs up on you or quickly shuts down the conversation, and these people knew Neil and they have absolutely no interest in talking about their friend or someone who was their friend, acquaintance, you know,
it's
something
telling.
Something wrong.
Telling.
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely that we're ever going to get one of these suspects to come forward and communicate with us and admit something. What becomes likely is giving them something to talk about. So by doing this podcast on Neil's case, and hopefully people are listening to it, and hopefully the people who actually know something are listening to it, and they will say something. And then the right person will overhear that something. That's what we're looking for. We got to give people something to talk about. And this is one of those conversation pieces. So the amount of information that we get in, majority of the information is, I overheard this. And that's what makes the puzzle. It's not the suspect calling us saying, hey, this is what I did.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to count on that communication. This year has been obviously the stupidest year for people being able to go and overhear conversations, eavesdrop on conversations in Ayton. You're going to hear something, I'm telling you. In my opinion, which may not align with Please Bring Me Home's. Yes, this is Nick Oldreeve's opinion. I've communicated lots about this with Matt and Melissa. They've worked this with me. And actually, Melanie, early on when she began with Please Bring Me Home, was out to a few searches, and we have cadaver dogs and ground penetrating radar out. So, in my opinion, based on everything that we've seen, I think that Neil went to Blondie's Tavern in Ayton that night. He went to communicate with one of the three men that we believe to be involved, and whether it happened outside of Blondie's at another location, that's where things get a little bit murky based on witness testimony and stuff, that witness statements to us. And I believe that he died from foul play. I believe that something happened and then somebody went into a rage and caused too much harm to Neil that he wasn't able to live. At that point, they disposed of his body somewhere. We know that that three of these males were seen afterwards, whether it was doing activity somewhere else that didn't seem logical for what they were doing. That could have been, just hypothetically that they're outside of Ayton and somebody's witnessed them doing something, and somebody's also witnessed them doing something in Ayton. So we were following up on a lot of those, where to search for Neil based on these. So, and I think we've come to that conclusion based on statements from Mary Ellen that she's recalled. And we've talked about the cigarette butts and how she came to her conclusion as to whose cigarette butts those were and whose cigarette butts those were. And I'm factoring all of that in with the way that these three males that we believe to be responsible for Neil's disappearance and demise, their responses to us and their responses to the Shedding Light podcast, their failure to respond is a response. So in my opinion, those three males, and I will say two of them may not have been directly involved, but I believe they were involved after the fact at the very least. And at least three people know what happened to Neil, at least. I think there's more than enough people out there that have the information that is needed to bring Neil home.
Yeah, I would just add to what Nick said, is that I don't believe this was a planned thing. I don't think they planned to kill him on Thanksgiving Eve, and having been seen with him at Blondie's, a couple of them were at Blondie's, so it just didn't make sense. I don't think it was planned, but something happened, like Nick said, after Blondie's. There was an argument, as often happens when you're drinking a lot of alcohol, and you're having an argument with someone, whether it's over money, whether it's over love, you get in fights. And fights can sometimes get nasty. And I think that fight definitely led to Neil's death, whether it was an accident, during the fight, he fell and hit his head, or whether he got the shit beat out of him and died. That argument led to a fight and led to his death. And then, as Nick said, at least three people know where he is.
And I think it's important to say that however he passed away isn't what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. However he passed away, even Please Bring Me Home's stance, whoever did it, that's not what we're looking for.
No.
We're looking for where Neil is. Unfortunately, the deeper we dive into this, and the deeper you girls at the Shedding Light podcast dive into it, it's going to get to a point where we're going to keep digging up more and more and more, and someone's going to roll on them, and someone's going to take a deal. Someone's going to get the $50,000. So they're running out of time to stay out in front of this, because it's going to run out. So in my opinion, they should go in. I will say where Neil is for a deal. I will say where Neil is for a deal. Do it, and let us bring this guy home who's been missing far too long. Bottom line.
Or just send in an anonymous tip.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, so I got his number, and I believe you girls were able to provide me with his number at Shedding Light. So then I decided to just call him. And of course, he did not pick up the phone. But immediately after I called him and left the voicemail, he texted me. And this was on February 17th, 2021, around 10:50 in the morning. So like I said, I had called him, and then he immediately texted me.
Who is this, and what is it about?
Nick, and I run an organization where we search for cold case missing persons. I'm wanting to share some info I received about you in the hopes that you can clarify info regarding Neil McDOUGALL. I understand you were friends.
What info?
It's a little complicated to talk via text. Would you rather chat via phone, or what would you prefer?
Text.
Okay. It might be best to ask a hypothetical question then. Let's say you were at a party years after Neil went missing. You can't recall where the party was, who said it, or even when this party was. But you overheard something about Neil and that he is where. I don't pass judgment, Al. We come at these backwards, only wanting to find the person, not worry about anything else. It would be unfair to not give you an opportunity to say your thoughts and theories around his case.
That is not a question that needs clarification. Ask the question.
Where, in your opinion, should we look for Neil? By telling me your opinion, you are not admitting that you know where he is.
In Alberta.
Cute. I'm thinking more local to Ayton.
That is what a police detective told me 2 weeks after he left.
Oh, really? That's interesting. I recall hearing something similar. So in your opinion, he left on his own?
Yes.
You knew Neil pretty well, right? Do you think that is something he would do?
Yes. He wanted out of his marriage.
How would he have gotten to Alberta? Hey, Al, just curious to hear your thoughts and theories. What do you recall about the weekend he went missing? You're not going to give me anything, are you? LOL. Would it be better to talk in person, Al? Hey, Al? And that's it. In my opinion, and this is from someone who's had plenty of conversations with Mary Ellen, Neil's widow now, right? There's no way he wanted out of that marriage. He was so in love. And I can tell you, I didn't know Neil. I wasn't born yet when Neil went missing. But you can tell by the way that Mary Ellen speaks about him and cries when she has memories of him. There was nothing but love in that marriage. Nothing but love in the marriage. Cases like, well, all of Please Bring Me Home's cases pissed me off in the sense that somebody knows you took someone's life, whether it be accidents or whatever happened. That already makes you a shitty person, in my opinion. But at this point, do the right thing. At some point, do the right thing now. Let us bring this person home. Mm-hmm. It's been long enough. Just say where this person is. Yeah, we've used canines, human remains detection dogs, and ground penetrating radar to look at a few places. I can tell you that the canine searches were conducted on properties and in large bush areas around Ayton. We also went kayaking in that river that leads up to the dam and searched both sides to see if anything had washed up. We're looking for fabric, shoes, anything out of the ordinary. It's just difficult to locate bones in water after it's been this long. The ground penetrating radar work that we did seemed to yield the most questions that further investigation needs to be conducted, probably by the use of ground penetrating radar. And we didn't just stumble upon these locations. That's probably about as much as I can say about the locations we searched.
So can we ask, how many cases do you guys have on your roster? How many cases does Please Bring Me Home have listed on their website currently? And I know new ones are being added every day because I see it.
It's close to 60. Yeah, West Coast to East Coast. Yeah.
Yeah, I can say right now that our Ontario cases, we have enough investigation team members now to be handling all of our Ontario cases. So we typically pair 2 investigation team members together to look at 2 or 3 cases together. So that's how we organize here. Out west, we're having trouble maintaining members. And out east, we're having trouble finding members. We're trying to find that magic formula that we have in Ontario that can hopefully work out west and out east.
On our website, pleasebringmehome.com, there is a recruitment section. There is a recruitment section for Western Canada, Eastern Canada, and Ontario. So if you have any interest, please visit our website and complete the form there, and we'll get in touch with you. We're not looking for necessarily former detectives and police officers. We're just looking for people who, first and foremost, care. When we're dealing with families of missing people, you need to have a lot of empathy and compassion. Then be someone who is curious, and asks a lot of questions and likes to go down rabbit holes like we've gone down for 6 years and we may never come out of again. But it's fascinating, and it's rewarding, and it's frustrating, and it's every emotion you can think of. It is takes you to some very dark places and keeps you awake at night. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. You'll sometimes learn more about yourself than you will about some of the cases you look at. I can tell you that much. Yeah. It's a way you can really give back. And I'm telling you, a lot of the families that we deal with are aware that this may not be, we may not be able to bring them home, but just, I feel that the family having someone to communicate with and knowing that there's somebody out there being the squeaky wheel consistently is so helpful for them. So helpful.
We reached out to as many former investigators as we could track down, and were fortunate to be able to chat with a retired detective who previously worked on Neil McDougall's case.
See, what occurred was when it came into my hands through cold cases, I ended up going and doing a reinvestigation on it because, I wasn't familiar with the case. And I had to dig up like old records and things like that. I went down to Toronto to the archives and had to look through them to see what was going on. So that occurred. Then I was tasked with the problem of finding, some of the possible witnesses and things like that. And I did that. And again, you're talking to people from something that happened a long time ago. We did end up getting a person of interest, and I can say that person was not cooperative whatsoever. Now, being that this investigation was done like several times, twice by the OPP that I'm aware of, because even after I more or less came to a dead end, or I had my feelings on, what went on, I couldn't go any further because I couldn't collect any more evidence. I couldn't do like anything with the evidence I had collected at that point in time. So the investigation sort of went dormant for a few years, and then it got picked up again by a different inspector, and they started going at it again. I was in cold cases for more or less 2008 to 2009. Last I knew, the fellow was living in Walkerton. That's part of the reason he blames us for when we started our investigation that his marriage failed, eh? Now, I don't know what you know about that, but there's things and reasons why we came into starting the investigation up again, too, eh? You sign an oath of secrecy. Okay, so that's part of when you come in. Rule of thumb, basically, is an ongoing live investigation you can't comment on, like evidence that was collected or anything like that. This is not like a new investigation, and to my knowledge, it has not been closed. So at any time, if something new comes in, they could pick it up again and run with it. And that's the dangerous part about giving out other information that you know about, but you can only take it so far. I know of specific things, but we were like unable to find those things, and in some instances we got in on the investigation just a little bit too late, where we might have been able to recover certain types of evidence that would have helped us a lot. I end up assisting Wes Gray with this investigation, and two of the officers over there gave me a hand with it too. Insofar as the contents of the ashtray were taken by us. Yeah, I think our people ended up doing DNA on the butts. But the thing is, DNA is only good if you have something to compare it to, eh? Because the two of them, like Neil and the suspect, knew each other quite well. Like it's not a dead end thing, because like I know when I was doing cold cases, we worked on one cases where we got a guy that killed a lady down country 30 years after the fact, and we arrested him in Owen Sound, and it basically went to no contest because we had DNA. At the end of the day, like I'm almost of a believer that you should have polygraph tests mandatory. If you reach a certain benchmark of reliability in your investigation, you should be able to have somebody do a polygraph test for you. But I know our person of interest, we wanted him to have a polygraph test, and he just didn't even want to talk to us. We hounded him for quite a while, and it was getting close to the stage where he was going to go and try to file a suit of harassment against us for pursuing him.
We were told that there were supposed to be 5 polygraphs that were going to take place, and that would have been the 3 men and the 2 wives. And then we understood that the two men, not Al, but the other two, did have polygraphs, but Al refused 2 or 3 times. So you would concur that he never had a polygraph because he refused and he didn't cooperate.
100%. Because I was pushing for it.
And do you know if the other two did?
No, I don't. I don't recall that. But in all fairness, I don't know where that would fall in on the timeline, because I know we didn't get a whole lot of cooperation to begin with. Now, that could have been done subsequent to my investigation. My understanding is that he had a wicked temper, and then everything had to go his way. Again, like I'm saying, if everybody committed to a polygraph, you could really clear that up very quickly. Like, I speak very highly of our polygraph people, because they're highly trained, and because of human beings being the way they are, it's nearly impossible to fool like a machine or the operator. I was told that the only way you would be able to beat a polygraph is if, like, you're a heroin addict who really believe that what you're saying is true, because your mind is rattled, or a pregnant woman, because her hormones are all out of whack. Yeah, but you see, the thing is, we're just chemical beings, and if your chemistry goes off, it can cause really bad things to happen. Oh, I can't speak for where Neil was, but I know his truck was found in Ayton there, and the subject just lived around the corner from where it was found.
In your professional opinion, how sure would you be that Al did it?
I'd be satisfied that he did it. And the reason I say that is there was no other person that had motivation to do it or the opportunity. Okay, so I'm giving you my opinion, and that hasn't changed from basically after I got into the investigation and saw everything that had gone on, and then saw how the individual reacted when I asked for certain things. Like, I was a detective for 20 years, and I put a lot of people in prison. And, when you're doing investigations, what's frustrating for a lot of police officers is you have that innate feeling of something having done something, but logistically that or intellectually that you don't have the goods to present to a court that would be accepted well enough to incarcerate somebody.
Did the police ever figure out the whole pyramid scheme thing? Like, who was running it and who owed who money?
I don't think that was an angle that we were pursuing heavily.
So then what was the motive? I
can't tell you that. I've got a pretty good idea, intellectually why it happened, but, I'd be holding myself out to dry if I told you. And when you look at that, everything makes sense, Human nature.
So it sounds as though there was something that compelled the OPP to reopen the case in 2006.
And sounds to me as though Al gave the police a very rough time, and he was completely uncooperative. Wonder why that would be. If you are indeed innocent, why not agree to a polygraph and clear your name once and for all?
And it sounds like Al seemed to be the only person of interest as far as police were concerned. The only one with motive and opportunity. I think it was around 2007, another detective on Neil's case, West Grey Police Sergeant Jeff Besselaar, was quoted as saying, "The McDougall investigation is getting down to the meat and potatoes." The article went on to say the case was reopened in earnest a year earlier, and that Sergeant Besselaar expected a resolution one way or another within 6 weeks.
Well, that would indicate to me, just like the previous recording indicates, that they really did have something new and compelling, some new evidence maybe back then.
Yes, that obviously fell through, as no arrests were ever made.
I asked the retired detective about this, and he responded, quote, I can't tell you why it was reopened. This is holdback information. And again, back to the number one obstacle in obtaining justice in a missing person case, the fact that there is no body.
We touched base with another officer assigned to Neil's case in the early days, but unfortunately, because of health issues, he was unavailable for an interview.
I was able to touch base with Detective Sergeant for Grey Bruce, Byron Swass, who happily accepts information from Please Bring Me Home, but it is a one-way street to preserve case integrity. He said, quote, "I am a supporter of any forum that leads to people giving info that helps solve these cases. I have to be a part of the equation that stays official, though, and follows all the rules of evidence and how we gather it. Me becoming a part of your podcast muddies that, and that can't happen. Sorry. I do hope to hear back from you with some intel to crack this case open." Unquote. We are so pleased and honored to be partnering with Please Bring Me Home to help make a difference.
And very pleased that we believe we can offer up some info about Neil's case, not formerly known to police.
By 2016, Mary Ellen wasn't the only one who couldn't believe the case had not yet been solved and no arrests have been made. She was contacted by Andy Raffay of the OPP Criminal Investigation Branch in London, saying he thought that by now they would have the case wrapped up. The police were 99.99% sure who did it. We can only hope and pray soon they will not only know, but have additional evidence needed to prove it in a court of law and bring Neil home.
You know, quite honestly, until dealing with Neil's case in particular, one thing that never occurred to us, or likely most of our listeners, is the aftermath that the family of a missing person is left to deal with. Although insurers finally declared Neil McDougall legally dead in 1996, more than a decade after Neil went missing, the struggle that Mary Ellen endured during those 11 years was full of despair, desperation, a suicide attempt, 3 lawyers, and a private investigation. Considering we are talking about a grown man with 2 jobs and a large financial obligation to his family household, the disappearance of Neil McDougall had far more than an emotional impact on his bride and her children. Mary Ellen was left alone to manage their new mortgage and all of the household bills, not to mention counsel her children on their loss. Down to only 1 income from 3 and having no compensation whatsoever, she struggled to keep a roof over their heads while enduring the daily pain of not knowing what happened to her husband and where he was. Imagine the stress, the fear, and the shock she endured when she was faced with carrying on without him, with absolutely no financial assistance. We all need to consider that. When a person is declared missing, they are not necessarily declared deceased, or worse, murdered. They're just missing. People can't cash in on a life insurance policy. They don't have the assistance that they need. Mary Ellen struggled daily to keep the bank from foreclosing on the house. She did not have any life insurance funds to assist with the financial obligations that she suddenly inherited.
To this day, the bank has never honored the mortgage insurance.
No one seemed to really care about her financial well-being or that of her children. She was facing the lowest time of her life, and she just could not handle it. She also experienced what she felt to be emotional abuse from one of the early detectives on the case. She felt that this particular cop botched the case from day one. In her own words, she described him as a real jerk. She stated that he would never come to her house, but would come to my work at the nursing home. They would page me to the front foyer where he would talk to me with people coming and people going. Then one morning I told him that the bank was taking my mortgage payments out to pay for Neil's loan for his truck, and they didn't care whether I had a roof over my head or not. He bluntly said, "Why don't you just declare bankruptcy?" And it got me upset with his arrogance. I asked my boss if I could go home, and I went home and I wrote a suicide note saying that I love Neil and my family, and that the police needed to take a much needed course on human compassion.
I think it was in the spring when I had my breakdown. Like I said, we were searching day and night. And then we went to Hamilton and then back to day and night around this area. I had a full-time job at the nursing home at Rockwood Terrace. And anyway, I wasn't eating and I wasn't sleeping. So I approached the doctor, because I wasn't eating and sleeping. And so he gave me a nerve pill or something. Well, that nerve pill brings you down. It doesn't make you hyper, it brings you down. So I became depressed and I ended up overdosing. And I was out of it for a day and a half, and the hospital said I shouldn't have made it. It was a miracle that I survived. And so my children went to my family doctor and said, look, Mom was a single parent, all her life, and was tough and everything, and always worked hard. And they said, we've never seen her like this. You need to do something. So Dr. Wally sent me to Homewood. And I've never had a problem since.
Mary Ellen told us that at 8 p.m., her girlfriend kicked in her locked bedroom door and called an ambulance. Doctors were amazed that she survived not only with the amount of pills in her system, but the length of time she lay unconscious. She went on to say, I believe I lived so I could carry on fighting for Neil's good name. Yes, you can share this, so no other loved one has to go through what I've had to go through, fighting for 11 years to have him declared dead. This ordeal has made me stronger. The perpetrators need to know that I will never give up.
W5 back then, I wrote a letter to Helen Hutchison. She was one of the reporters on back then. And so I sent it priority post. The very next morning at 9 o'clock, I got a phone call at Rockwood Terrace where I work. And she said, the manager of CBC said, this is going on the air. We're coming up to start interviewing. When they come up to do the interview, and the OPPs wouldn't let them do it because it would bring up how they botched the case so bad. A year ago, it'll be going on 2 years ago, when Nick had all of us 5 cold cases around the table at Trixie's bar, and it was for W5, and Avery Haynes interviewed. All 5 of us cases came out with the exact same story, how the OPPs botched every one of these cold cases. They didn't take them seriously. And so we were supposed to go on the air like a half an hour from just the interview and a half an hour from Nick. Well, they cut us off, so they wouldn't let them air it. That's the second time that the OPP have cut off being televised because we're bringing up because they botched the cases.
I just think it's really sad, the police negligence. And I guess, I don't know if you call it negligence or ignorance or lack of evidence or lack of experience or what it was. And just the state of affairs with Mary Ellen after Neil went missing was just so sad.
It's unbelievable.
Couldn't imagine having to go through it. I really couldn't.
No, the poor lady. And to be so disrespected like that when you're at your worst and all you want to do is find your husband and get your family back to normal. And this, I'm going to say idiot, goes and does this to her. Like, it's unbelievable.
Well, I think things have changed a lot. Back then, when somebody went missing, people found themselves very, very alone. Mm-hmm. And people made up so many stories. Nobody knew where to turn. It's very different now, thank God.
I think there's a lot more resources for people that are going through emotional distress. And you're right. I think 35 years ago, there probably wasn't a lot of that. She probably did her own counseling for her children and had nobody to talk to.
Mm-hmm. And law enforcement agencies in general, they've adopted new practices in teaching the value of empathy and compassion and how a little goes a long way. We have to remember that police work in and of itself is a very high stress job, and one that can take its toll on a police officer if not kept in check. So it kind of goes both ways, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I know police officers that, suffer post-traumatic stress, and maybe we don't thank law enforcement enough for the job that they do, and they put their life on the line every day. We're talking specific individuals, so you can't paint everybody with the same brush, and that's not what we're trying to do.
Everybody needs to remember that they're a spokesperson for the agency they represent, right?
There's just seemed to be a very serious lack of compassion, just a really, really poor bedside manner, if you will. It's like having a horrible doctor when you're giving birth, not making you feel very, very uncomfortable. So I think that profession requires compassion. And in this case, it didn't sound like she was treated with much of it.
And that's a really good way to put it, Susie. Bedside manner, because we've all been there. And when you are in a place of vulnerability, you look at people who are in a role of authority to help support you and not put you down.
No, imagine.
You're right.
Right. Imagine thinking that this person might be the only one that can help me, and then they've just shut you down and make you feel like a total ass. And make you feel like they don't care.
And you don't know what to do. You don't know what to do. You're not a police officer. You're going to them for help.
And in regards to the W5 investigation, how that got kiboshed, like we always say, hold back evidence can be crucial when making a case, and the public never knows what the police have up their sleeve. So maybe they had good reason to put an end to that.
Maybe they did. Mary Ellen was very candid and frank with us regarding her trials and tribulations surrounding Neil's business. I'm sure it couldn't have been easy for her to share that. And if one listener can relate or learn something from it, then it's well worth sharing. She recounts, accountants said Neil's garbage business was worth $25,000, but I only got an offer for $5,000, so I took it. I ran the business for a year after his disappearance. I hired a driver, etc. Anyway, when lawyers, real estate, etc. were all paid, I received $757. And yes, a lot of his private customers never paid their bills, as I did all the billing. So I knew. About 12 years after his disappearance, I had to sell the house to pay over $30,000 in lawyer and court fees. And I had to get permission from a court judge to be able to keep the whole amount from the sale of the house for myself. I always had to fight every step of the way for decades. Very, very hard road for a woman. God, we have great respect and love for Mary Ellen as she overcame the worst imaginable emotional, physical, financial, psychological damage anyone could imagine. I don't know that I'd be able to do the same. I really don't.
It's devastating but she came out of this. She's an amazing person. And she made it through but she really had to fight. Like when you have to chase people for their bill, they know your husband has disappeared, probably dead, and they won't pay. That's disgusting. She has no one else.
Talk about taking advantage of somebody, eh?
When they're down and out.
I hope karma's coming back to bite them.
Yeah, were they simply taking advantage of Mary Ellen's inconceivable misfortune? Can't even imagine how people could be so cruel.
In small towns, rumors seem to be very well known. I'm from a small town, so I can speak from experience. Without intention, rumors can gravely impact someone's life. So we all need to take note of this lesson and be cautious that when repeating an unconfirmed story, we make sure to use the word alleged. Mary Ellen wrote this 2 years ago in response to a social media comment, inferring that it was a possibility that Neil had simply left town and his family.
Quote, Neil went to Ayton that night to collect money owed to him and was killed for it. Obviously, you haven't been reading about the case over the years in the Owen Sound Sun-Times. When the government funded extra money to work on many cold cases in Ontario about 10 years ago, they brought in the profilers from Aurelia, and 3 times the perpetrator refused the polygraph. They basically told him they knew he did it, but without a body, it is hard to prosecute him in court. Do you know the effect of rumors on a spouse whose loved one has gone missing? It feels like a knife stabbing me in the heart. People who truly knew Neil wouldn't listen to rumors. They know better. Rumors are meant to be hurtful. The police and I know a lot more than we are able to divulge to the public. Please get educated on the case from the previous newspaper articles. So in her defense, Mary Ellen was pretty frustrated and a bit irate that people were jumping to conclusions about Neil just up and leaving her and how hurtful it was. And she wanted to respond and make sure people were educated and understood what was going on.
Yeah. The rumors can really destroy someone. And she's already feeling bad enough. And then she has to hear all these rumors.
Well, when you think about it, girls, the rumor that Neil just left town seems to have started with the three men. And they have continued to perpetuate this rumor until today. We've documented that from all three of them. The last persons to have seen Neil before he left. Everyone we've spoken to who knew Neil does not believe this for a minute, and there is no evidence to support this theory whatsoever. So it's understandable why Mary Ellen got so upset at the suggestion of it.
Mary Ellen's a hero to me. She persevered through something that she didn't have to.
I guess in response to Mary Ellen's comment, her experience with rumors is that they can be very hurtful. And I guess when you hear us encourage people to relay their rumors to us, it's because sometimes rumors can be planted with a grain of truth. And if you can trace those rumors back to their source, they may indeed prove to be fact-based. Pros and cons of rumors.
Yeah.
We give a huge amount of credit to Mary Ellen for not giving up and for reawakening her husband's case with the help of her psychic friend, Mary Ellen Rodriguez, and to the team at Please Bring Me Home for investing their personal time and efforts into Neil's case among so many others. They showed up at a time when Mary Ellen had not heard anything from authorities for over 1.5 years regarding Neil's case. They helped put the wind back in her sails and give her renewed hope and gratitude because someone else actually cared after all these years. We feel that a woman's intuition should not be readily dismissed. We think that Mary Ellen knew her husband best and has a pretty good idea of who the perpetrators are.
But we searched every inch of ditch that went from Ayton to Highway 6 and from Ayton to Highway 4. Thinking, he could have, got hit and could be. And I heard that at where Neil and
Al
worked, someone said that we had searched every inch of ditch, and
Al
spoke up and said, why? They won't find him there. And that's the truth.
Taking all the facts that she herself has learned and analyzing her husband's out-of-character actions, she questions why her husband would knock on a door at 2 a.m., especially when he had to be on the garbage truck at 5. You'll recall from our previous episode that Al's wife stated that Neil was knocking on her door at 2 a.m. Mary Ellen surmises that Al told his wife to say that Neil showed up that night to talk to her about keeping her marriage intact so that he could keep his story straight. The story she believes the three men concocted that night in Russell's shed, where they had Neil's truck hidden until Sunday.
Neil went to Ayton that night to collect his money because had a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme. And my husband and his brother both had thousands of dollars invested. Well, Neil and his brother both wanted out. They wanted their money back. So Neil went to Ayton to talk to, I think he was talking before, bugging him before about getting out. So he went to Ayton that night, and that's what he was killed over. Well, then when the police was talking to them, they concocted their own stories and said the reason Neil went to Ayton was to help with his marital problems.
Mary Ellen believes that Al's wife would have complied as she feared his temper. Mary Ellen states, I still am adamant that Neil was killed earlier that night. Neil would never ever put me through the worry of coming home late like that, totally out of character. The only story that night was from the perpetrators.
We have the versions that happened that night. And then, of course, the police, who they talked to, was the last three people to have seen him, which was the three boys. So they gave their version of the story, which is totally different, you know. And the version that I was told from the police was that night at the hotel, when Neil was there at the hotel, which is
Russell's
wife, was playing poker, and she was winning. And she would... In the story, they said that Neil was coming over and holding her money for her, and they were chumming together, and then now for her to say she doesn't even know, you know.
Oh, it was weird. You can tell when somebody's lying, and it was like, and the comment that I'd like to go back and listen to, but she made the comment that you know, we barely knew him, and then, you know, that was 35 years ago. Whenever that happened, whenever he left town or whatever. And I thought, that's an odd comment to make.
Yeah.
So where was this supposed poker game? At
the hotel. It was at the hotel.
And it says he went with another person and went and met the co-worker that he'd been looking for at a different location, and then came back to the bar. Then it says nothing. And then it says, but then he was last seen leaving a residence at 2 a.m. So there's so much information missing.
Well, what I had heard from the cops, Neil went to Ayton to find, so he went to the hotel to see if Al was there, and Al wasn't.
Doug
was there. So Neil said to
Doug,
"Where's Al? I came to see Al. Where is he?" And
Doug
said, "Al is at my trailer." So anyway, Neil said to Doug, "Hop in my truck. I want to go talk to him." So they went to Doug's trailer to talk to Al. Well, Al was in bed with another man's wife or something in the trailer. So then they let Al wouldn't come out and talk to them, or didn't want to stay out and talk to them. So they went back to the hotel, and Neil had told Al, "Meet me back at the hotel," you know. So that's why Neil.
Right.
So he was there earlier, but then that's when he went there about 7:30.
So he very well could have done that and could have come back to the hotel.
But that was earlier in the evening, yes.
Yes, and when that young gal saw him leaving again, he may have been there, and maybe they talked about it, and he said, "You're not getting your stinking money back." So then Neil left, and the three of them left after him for some reason.
Yep.
So our question is, was Neil really acting out of character that night? A little, a lot, or not at all? Depends on how many of the details reported were actual facts. And we know that so many of the details about that night, the hours after Neil left home, were reported to the authorities by the trio of men.
And what I hate to put out on the podcast is that I hate keep repeating information after 35 years that isn't true.
I know.
Because it's coming from those three jackasses that they last saw him at 2:00. I don't even want to say that.
That has always irked me when I've read the Sun-Times and seeing that, he was last seen at 2 a.m., you know, or whatever.
Mary Ellen relayed another story to us.
That same day, on that Saturday, that I was led to the shop and then led to that basement there where the coins were. Mm-hmm. Then I was led across the river by the feed mill, and I was going to search the feed mill because it was mostly empty. But when I went in the driveway, I was drawn to a house that was ahead of me, and I said to them, "That house is abandoned. I need to go check that out." Well, we went up to the house. There was curtains on all the windows, but when we looked in, there was no furniture. It was abandoned. There was 2 long barns behind the house, and there was an abandoned car in between. Well, I looked in the abandoned car, and on the dash had a Reader's Digest by the name Robert Tone, you know, a subscription for Robert Tone. Well, Neil had bought his last garbage truck from Robert Tone in Ayton, so it kind of piqued my interest. So I opened the door and looked in. On the passenger side was a paper bag with empty chip bags and empty cheesy bags, an empty cigarette package, an empty coal-tip cigar package. So I think at one point, and then when I went around to the trunk, the grass was real high. Well, at the trunk, the grass was growing into the trunk, like it was as though someone had left it
open.
The trunk, you know. So we couldn't get in to search. So I phoned the OPPs in Mount Forest, and they said they sent someone up to look, but there was nothing in there. But I think his body was there at one point too.
Is it possible that Neil had been guiding Mary Ellen all these years? We think it's a definite possibility. She says, yes, he is up there still looking after me, my special angel.
And I must say that your John must be a very, very wonderful man, because it can't be easy having a partner with this on your shoulders, right? He must be a very understanding man.
Yes, he is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's wonderful that you have him, and I'm happy to know that.
It was actually Neil that brought him into my life. I hadn't dated in over 12 years and couldn't care less, and he brought him into my life.
Nice. So you've been together a while.
9 years, yeah.
Nice.
I was another part-time job I got when I was bored. I was a part-time crossing guard.
Okay.
And his ex-wife used to work with me at Rockwood, and they've been divorced. So anyway, he was driving by and he said it just felt like somebody grabbed his steering wheel, and he did a complete U-turn and came up, and I had to jump back on the sidewalk because I thought he was going to hit me. And then he asked me out. But we both think it was Neil that had a hand in that. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very happy for that.
John asked her out on a date, and they've been together ever since. That was 9 years ago, and Mary Ellen is very happy now and has such an understanding, supportive partner. But the story of her life is unfinished. It doesn't have an ending. She needs your help. We need your help to put Neil to rest. There is someone out there that holds the final piece of the puzzle that will bring the answers and bring Neil home, finally, after 35 years. 35 years.
I don't know if you know Neil, but he was the most caring, loving man that I've ever met in my life. He would give his shirt off the back to anybody. He was always buying me roses and cards and hiding them. So when I come home from work, I'd find them that says, I love you. And he was just the sweetest man. That soul needs to be, not forgotten.
There are so many missing people in Canada alone. According to RCMP stats, between 70 and 80,000 people are reported missing every year. And although most are found within 7 days, each and every one of these cases deserves attention. We have made it our mission to cover as many of these cold cases as possible. We thank you for your patience in between episodes as we are striving to become better storytellers and convey a clearer picture of the circumstances. Generally speaking, podcasts are for entertainment, but we are here for much more than that. So our digging and poking around can sometimes take longer than expected. They didn't call me Nancy Drew for nothing when I was a kid.
Yeah, and of course I was just one of the Hardy Boys, because Angela always had to be Nancy Drew. And she had to be Wonder Woman, and I was always the guy that was tied up with the truth rope. I was always the guy. Anyways, all joking aside, our door is always open. We can always be reached by email, text, or messenger, all of which can be found attached to this podcast.
When we first started our podcast roughly a year ago, we never imagined how emotionally involved we would become. It is impossible for us to tell the story about someone's loved one without becoming 100% invested. It is so difficult for us to declare a season over when the missing have not been found. We never intend to turn our backs on the families, and that is why we encourage our listeners to help. Join our discussion group. Put your heads together, dig, prod, think outside the box. Help us help these families. Continue to share and shed light.
Speaking of sharing, Nick and Matt have a few things they wanted to share before we sign off about their future plans for Neil's case.
So since Shedding Light podcast has started to post their episodes on Neil's case. Not only have Shedding Light got information in, but Please Bring Me Home has as well. And we've been communicating back and forth about some of these tips. Because of this podcast, we're going to be searching a couple new areas in the springtime and summer by use of K9 and ground penetrating radar. We also, after doing some ground penetrating radar searches last year, we have to go and look at two particular areas more clearly. We have to take more scans of this ground because there were a couple anomalies that came up at both locations that we have to verify. So we certainly have our hands full looking at more information for Neil's case. And in my opinion, Neil's case has never been this active in a number of decades. So I'm very, very excited.
Well, I wish we could say we're sorry for putting so much more work in your lap, but we're not.
No, we're grateful for it. We're very grateful for the information. And this is such a useful tool for people to be able to listen to it on car rides, whatever they're doing at the gym, out for runs, listening to this podcast, and it's giving people things to talk about.
And we're very, very grateful for you guys because this is how it all started, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
full circle. We always dedicate our podcast to Nolan, so dedicated in Nolan's memory.
That was the moment that we recognized that this process works. Mm-hmm. That was as sad as that outcome was, it really solidified with us at Please Bring Me Home, like this process can work. If you put the media attention in the right place in front of the right person, with a link to click and send information, it works.
Can I tell you another little story? A quick one. So John, my partner, was working out at farm, and he sent home some raw milk for me to drink. John and we drink 8 liters a week we go through. I have never felt better. But if we're caught coming out of with milk and the ministry stops us, John and I can get a criminal record and we can go to jail for this.
Yep.
But yet is walking free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Crazy world.
You need to wear a big t-shirt. You need to wear a big t-shirt that says that. I can be jailed for drinking raw milk, but my husband's murderer is walking the streets.
Yep.
So there you have it, folks. As much as we would like to say we have tied Neil's case up with a pretty bow, we cannot. Not without your help. We are not closing the door on Neil's case. Our friends at Please Bring Me Home will continue their search, and we will continue to bring you updates, hopefully sooner than later. Please follow our Instagram and Facebook pages for updates and news. And as always, thank you for listening, for sharing, and for caring. Thank you for working with us, shedding light on unsolved and cold cases in Canada. We couldn't do it without you, and we really appreciate you.
The folk all around you, not believing it's real. How can this happen? So